the new season of Black Mirror coming out, I thought it was only right to do a whole big ranking of every single episode of the series. I actually made this video a long time ago. By which I mean like a year and a half ago, around that. A much earlier point when I didn't really like the videos I made back then. And you know, it certainly didn't like that ranking, so I decided to go back and redo the whole thing. Let me tell you, my top and bottom rankings are the exact same, but everything in between was very much different than what it was originally. Well, more or less. I feel like the ones I really didn't enjoy all that much are still down there, and the ones I really enjoyed are still much up there. You know, I didn't have too big of a difference of opinion for this ranking than I did before. However, the big difference is that was before even season 5, and now we have a whole new season with 5 new episodes, right? Plus, it was before Bandersnatch, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember how all these worked. Point being, this was before quite a bit of episodes and quite a bit of better video making. So now with that, I decided to redo the entirety of my ranking of Black Mirror, and this way in a little bit of a different way. We're gonna be talking about all the episodes from the start to the end in chronological order, just because it's more fun that way, right? Also, if it isn't clear, massive spoiler warning right here. Be warned, I'll be talking about every single Black Mirror episode that has ever existed. So yeah. Side note, you could probably just skip right to the end and get to the ranking, but why not go through my entire video and look at my opinions of each episode, just as in release order. That being said, if you aren't interested, here's some of my other socials. I just wanted to front load this real quickly. But most importantly, keep in mind, these are my opinions, and when I say I don't like the one that everyone likes, don't kill me. Okay, thank you. Continue with the video. Though I feel like if I did worst to best, I still would begin with the very first episode.
That's all, folks.
Right, what's it about? Princess Susanna, the popular princess, has been kidnapped. So now the royal family has to deal with this fact. They constantly try and find out where she is, and to try and not have the point of the episode happen, which is that the person who's kidnapping her and holding up for ransom doesn't want money. They want the prime minister to have sex with a pig. That's the point of the episode. Now keep in mind, this was before the series found its footing, right? But at this point of the series, we now know it's more about technology and looking into humanity through it. And technically this episode gives you that, right? It is about how this mob culture can make people ultimately do horrible things when they're pressured by the general populace. However, not only is it just like a general thing that human beings do all the time, but it also doesn't really give a good showing of how technology has anything to do with that. Yeah, they talk about it on Twitter a bunch, but they also talk about it on the news a lot too. And honestly, the deciding factor that makes the prime minister have sex with the pig, because he does, by the way, it was his wife, who's the worst part of the episode. She spends most of it going, you have to get our daughter back, and if this is the way you have to do it, then you have to, because then I won't love you. And you know what happens after he does so? They never speak ever again. They just pretend that they love each other going forward, because how do you like fix your relationship after that? So there was no winning in that situation, and that's purely the reason I hate this episode. It's also a stupid concept. I hate it so much. Maybe people like the absurdity of it, but I just cannot stand this episode. It takes itself way too seriously, and I will admit that the actual acting of it is really good, right? You can really tell this man really doesn't want to have sex with a pig. But like, why is that a thing though? I hate it. I was told this series was going to be a lot more about technology and how it affects people, and when the first episode that you have to watch when you like click on it on friggin' Netflix is a man having to have sex with a pig or else, and you're like, excuse me? And it all ends up being for nothing because she gets let go before he even does it. So if he just waited like a few more seconds, a little bit longer, and was like, maybe I'll wait on it for a sec, then it would have been like, hold on, you don't need to anymore. We found her. It would have just been like, great.
I want to ride my bicycle. I want to ride my bike.
15 Million Merits, the episode which introduces this very famous song of the series. It'll be in multiple episodes, specifically a couple later on where they actually sort of use it as part of the plot, and it's a very nice song. Hell, there's a Miley Cyrus cover, which is weird, but what's even weirder is what specifically 15 Million Merits is about. It's a society where the majority of people ride stationary bikes in order for an exchange of merits, a currency based to buy essentials and virtual entertainment, which are all really stupid and boring looking, but that's sort of the point of the episode. The society that they live in is very much everything crunched down and everything like watered down to the point where it's just the most boring things possible, right? The fact that the most boring thing possible looks like a Xbox 360 avatar is kind of funny to me. But yeah, like all of it is the most basic like garbage that people on TV want to make. You know, this was after the writer's strike, so this was when reality TV was a big thing. So, you know, it's funny to see that it's made fun of here and that it's just like pointless droll content that anyone could make without any thought. And that's very much what a lot of the content that they have to live with here, and how you basically have to pay merits to like skip ads, especially crazy saucy ads, which, considering I've been seeing just like weird creepy ads on friggin' Instagram, we're kind of closer and closer to that part of the world being what we are now, isn't it? Main character Bing basically gives all of his merits, which he got from his dead brother, all the way to Abby, whom he's to have go on this show. It takes all 15 million merits to get on said show, with only really one shot to even potentially win. But it seems like maybe she'll be able to win, and maybe the world will have something to really deal with, but it ends up just, she's basically peer pressured thanks to drugs to go into porn, which now Bing can't skip because he spent all of his merits. And he basically like ride bikes his way all the way to get back onto the show, ending with him like pretending that he'll kill himself, right? But then even after this amazing performance, it just makes them give him his own show where he's doing that daily, which is this like false way to make people ride their bikes more, right? It shows you that even the like slightest amount of personality can easily be taken out by the big corporations that just want to turn everything into something more and more commercialized to have people buy merch off of it, right? That's very much what 50 millimeters is about. However, I'm gonna go ahead and say something that I feel like people will kind of get a little bit angry at. I don't think it's all that great. I think it's a good episode, certainly. It's a very entertaining one, and again, Daniel Kaluuya is actually really great in this. However, in general, I think it's a little bit too goofy, maybe a little bit unrealistic in terms of the like amount of stuff that they have, and I'm unclear what the point of the society is. Maybe the point of it is that it is pointless, and that the actual like ride bikes are meant to just represent the like repetitive work that we do day in, day out with no real end to it, which when you think about it does make sense. I need a little bit like better world building from this ride bike world and what else there is there and what they're even powering, which is actively asked during this point, but all right. It is a wild concept, maybe a little bit too wild, which was why it just isn't my favorite episode, but don't get it wrong. I think it is a really good episode. It's a very entertaining one.
You fucked my wife.
What?
The Entire History of You, starring Tony Kebbell and Jodie Whittaker as this just like constantly arguing couple. This implanted eye thing called the Grain, which is a vaguely reoccurring thing throughout the series in different variations. It allows someone to sort of look through their memories, which includes almost all of their life, or at least up until the point of when it was put in, which at this point in society, most people have since birth, basically. Some people haven't gotten it, and it seems to be a more like recent technology, but it's enough that it's basically been like fully in people's lives, and it's very much like replaced certain things like phones, and it's still very much how it is in modern day, right? People still all the time talk about their stories and always like want people to look at their photos, so it's still very much that sort of thing. But now it seems that it's really taken over people's lives and made them nearly non-human. How people like aren't even able to have regular sex. They have like,
"Oh, Johnson, do you remember that blowjob you got one time?" Yes, I can relive it right now through my eyeball.
the main point of the episode is not necessarily the technology, but it's more about the story being told with the technology, and that it's all about the main character, Liam, who's very suspicious of his wife, Fionn, and her behavior towards her friend Jonas. And as we find out more and more about their past and her past with Jonas, Liam gets more and more suspicious. And honestly, the real point of this episode isn't that, there goes women again. It's more that both of these people are entirely in the wrong. And it's more just that it's a futuristic society that has become really obsessed with their memories and showing it off to each other and having this like perfect life in order to do so, that it's very hard to like keep secrets anymore. But it's also a really like clear, very well written tale about these two people who clearly love each other. They are in a caring relationship that has quickly fallen apart due to some horrible mistakes in the past. both of these people are in the wrong here. It's not one or the other. Both of these characters are in the wrong. Now, this does result in this being a little bit like too much, right? This is very much like a smaller version of a Marriage Story. It's a very realistically falling apart relationship that clearly was loving at one point, especially when you see at the end of it.
Every day I wake up and I hope you're nachos!
But it can be a little bit unenjoyable due to that. I'm sure people want to see interesting technology and some actual semblance of what humanity could become due to said technology. You get a little bit of that, you get a little bit of that commentary, but it's mostly drama, very sad drama, which will not be the last time this series does that sort of thing. I do really enjoy this episode regardless, and Jodie Whittaker is one of the most beautiful women on the planet.
Nice and hotto, Mr. Roboto!
Be right back. Speaking of one of the most beautiful women on the planet, Hayley Atwell. Now, I could just tell you that's the only reason I really love this episode. However, it's one of the best ones, simply due to the fact that it's also a very realistic relationship. The first episode of Season 2, Be Right Back, is all about Martha and her boyfriend Ash, who very clearly have a very loving relationship, which is immediately destroyed right after Ash gets in a car crash. Martha is distraught. She feels absolutely horrible, especially now the fact that she's pregnant with Ash's child. Alone, what is she gonna do? After kind of being harassed by her one friend to do so, she ends up kind of like given into this AI thing, which learns how to be the person through looking through their personal information of who Ash was, which ends up making it more and more accurate. It allows it to have a voice that is exactly like Ash's voice, and it gets to the point where she's able to put that AI that has been learning into a robotic body, which, regardless of the fact that robo-penises could be a thing in the future, and that worries me. This is a very interesting episode because it does show you that AI, despite as easily as it could get in order to replicate humans, that's not the same, right? AIs can't replace us and AIs can't replace humans, and regardless of whatever BS replica AI apps that you get, it is not a good replacement for actual human interaction. It's a strange tale that made a little bit less sense back then, but now with the advent of AI learning more and more, it's very much an episode that has aged even better with time, right? It's a really good one. It's a very emotional one. I absolutely love it. Both actors are really great. Hayley Atwell is great in everything, but also you get Donald Gleason, right? He's absolutely fantastic. Way better here than he was in Star Wars.
I'm the spy.
What? Who are you people?
Now keep in mind, I've already put a spoiler warning, but if you haven't seen these episodes, do it, right? Most of them, but especially this one. Mostly because the whole crux of why this one's great stands on you not having watched it before, right? Rewatching it, it's not as great as it was the first time watching it. Because the first time you watch it, you are very confused, and it really puts you for a turn there. As every episode needs to have a little twist at the ending, this episode definitely really relies on that whole concept of Black Mirror doing that a lot. A woman wakes up, she has no idea who she is. She has just full amnesia, and the only thing she knows that she has weird flashes of people in her head, and she's being constantly chased by weird masked men with like some specific sign on them, and is constantly being like filmed by people on their phones, some kind of like hidden signal that's making them do them, and it's at the White Bear facility, and that there's some kind of connection that this woman has to her, and as they get there, start trying to destroy it. They've escaped all the people, maybe they're gonna be able to save all of them, but oops, the whole thing opens, and it was all a show. The person you were rooting for the whole time, they were evil. They murdered a child.
Gotcha, bitch!
Her and her husband murdered a child, and while he was able to get off easy, she is now forced to go through this constant repetitive thing where this like almost theme park event happens every day or so, where she basically gets reset every day and then put back in that same house, where then all the people who are onlooking are able to watch and sort of just mock her. It really like gives you the idea of, are the people who are the onlookers as bad as the child murderer? Maybe they could have just as much of instinct to try and just like murder this person, and God knows this is definitely strange and unusual punishment, so you know, maybe this shouldn't be the thing. This is pretty inhumane, but also the thing that this woman had did to this child, who wasn't hers, was also very inhumane. So by the end, you're not sure how to really feel about this, but I feel like the big twist is absolutely genius. I love this episode due to just the way it made me feel, confusing me the entire time and having me on the edge of my seat, and then finally spinning that on me. Whoa, calm down. Why? But like going back into it, knowing it the whole time, it can be interesting on a second watch just to see how everything kind of comes together. And you're like, oh, okay, I see, that makes sense. Due to the fact of its very first viewing, this is pretty high up on the rankings, but you know, it's really up to you on whether or not you really find that twist all that actually outstanding as I do.
Where's Waldo? Where's Waldo?
The Waldo moment, the very last episode of season 2, is quite the stinker. The first time I watched it, I was enjoying it for a little chunk of it. Ultimately, when the main character ends up being a big piss baby because the one girl didn't call him back, and he just like shoot her out on live TV, even though clearly she was gonna call him later, which is what she says later. While she could have explained that, it's still friggin' piss baby. Well, 10 years later, it does end up being a little bit more like clear on what it's meant to be, when though the actual like bear that is Waldo is based upon Boris Johnson, who would later become prime minister, and it would later result in it being very similar to the big political theater that is modern day politics, both in America and in Britain, especially with certain people. It takes too long to really get to the whole point of the episode, and by the end of it, you're like, okay, whatever. You don't care about any of the characters. It really doesn't do a good job actually exploring the political theater that is then, but especially modern day politics. And if this was made a little bit more recent, it could have been a little bit better, but still, it's an episode that probably could have just been a little bit longer, and it could have explored what it was in a little bit better depth. It's a good concept that it ends up not really doing anything with, and focuses on a very boring but also unlikable main character, and then that ending's stupid. Did they just take over the world with this bear? Like, come on, stupid.
This Christmas feels like the very first Christmas to me.
Now, whether or not you count this as season 2 or season 3 or its own separate thing, the next episode is White Christmas. White Christmas is definitely one of the best of them. Being 3 separate storylines altogether, it's sort of an anthology within an anthology. There's only 2 episodes that are like this, and both of them, mostly this one, are pretty good. Matt and Joe, being John Hamm and Rafe Spall, are talking about their pasts as they sit in this cabin that you don't really get an idea on why they're in this cabin to like as the episode begins, but that's sort of the point of the episode. Hamm tells the first 2 storylines, ultimately talking about how absolutely horrible the man is, once helping to spy on a man's date to sort of help him out horribly, and then his life basically making people's digital consciousness break until they're able to work with someone in some kind of horrible version of Amazon Alexa. The technology used in spying on some guy's date to help him out is very similar to what we see in Entire History of You, and it also shows that a person ultimately can be blocked from a person's vision, which for some reason also includes every picture that person's taken, which is just weird, honestly.
Johnson, do you remember that blowjob you got one time? Oh, I could try, but I wouldn't be able to see her image, for she's blocked me. That's disturbing.
This is exactly what happens to the second guy. The 3rd story ultimately shows off that he was blocked from this woman that he was very much in love with after she found out that she was pregnant. He soon finds out that she kept the baby, and he basically goes the entirety of her life not knowing what she looked. Who invented this technology? They're evil. But even more so is evil is whoever wrote this episode, because it ends with him finding out that that daughter wasn't his the whole time, and was in fact the guy that he assumed that his wife cheated on him with. Whoops. And due to the fact that the little girl's granddad was dead, she had to go out in the winter wilderness to find help because she didn't know how to use a phone, I guess. And so she ended up dying out in the snow. And all this ended up being this man's fault, which is where we get to the little ending of the episode, where we find out that all this was this big revolving cookie-like prison for him, so he could finally break and give an actual confession, because the real version of him wouldn't. All this, of course, done by John Hamm, which is very interesting, but he ends up not getting off scot-free because now he's blocked by the whole world, which, that's just a living hell right there. I would love to find out what happened to this character, right? It's been multiple years since this episode came out, and I would love like a little bit of a follow-up in some way with what happened to John Hamm's character, you know, but we haven't gotten it yet.
-5 stars!
Also, kind of back with the IM plants, I'm pretty sure a similar thing to the grain and such is the whole nosedive rating system, where you give someone a rating and it ends up literally being connected to the society itself. If you have a low rating, you're basically ostracized, you can't get into your job, you can't get certain jobs, and you're barely cared about, right? But you get better deals and a better life the bigger rating you are, which is a really great interpretation on how society treats other people and treats popular people, and how we just shun other people that we deem undesirable. And due to that, we keep the like best image possible, and we just like don't let ourselves be ourselves in the just in case that we'll be judged by other people. Well, I feel like people complain a little bit too much about cancel culture. It is a thing that people very much pick every small thing you do and run with it, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. There's a bunch of people who will pick the smallest imperfections and will run with it, and that's why a lot of people, especially people who are famous, have kept themselves a certain way and have made sure they've made no mistakes and show no faults. And it's horrible. And this ends up being the big ending of the episode, where after the main character fights so hard to get to this part so she can get a bigger ranking for a supposed better life, she ends up screwing up multiple times and makes a big mess of herself, but ends up learning that it's just better to just be yourself by the end, right? This big catharsis moment where she's able to just insult somebody and just feel ugly and just feel open, and being able to actually be herself is a fantastic moment that I absolutely love.
My life is like a video game, trying hard to beat the stage.
Playtest. Playtest is about Cooper, who's been traveling the world to avoid his mother after the death of his father. He meets up with this cool girl named Sonia, and after being victim to identity theft and losing a bunch of his money, he has to try and do some odd jobs. He ends up finding this little odd job by doing some playtests, which, man, if it was that easy, I'd be doing that shit right now, but not for this company, this weird special company that is in London doing augmented reality, which ends up being injecting stuff into your brain and making you see stuff, which is cool, right? It ends up being this funny little whack-a-mole thing, but they end up going, all right, next level, a horror one, which ends up being a little bit spooky, as he's like, oh, there's my school bully in a spooky outform, and there he is, his big-ass spider, and he is as a big-ass spider, which, oh, that's terrifying, honestly. But then it ends up getting too real. He starts feeling it. He starts hearing stuff, losing his mind, which is like the main fear. And to really tap into that fear of losing your mind, and due to that, it's something that could entirely happen to him when he was older. That whole fear honestly hits me pretty close to home. This is a really great episode. It's a very just generally creepy episode. It takes a little bit too long to get to the creepy stuff. I would have loved if it stuck there a little bit longer before getting to the end of it. It'd be a lot higher in my ranking personally if it didn't have the single worst ending of the whole series. Honestly, I hate that ending so much, right? The whole point of the episode, I feel like, was really like learning to just get back into reality and not just finding things to keep you from it. So him actually talking to his mom and getting over this would have been the perfect ending, right? Maybe the show could just have a good ending. You know, it had one in the previous one, so why have this like negative bad ending, right? Why does it need to do these twists all the time? Sometimes it works out and it can be really good, but sometimes it's this, and I hate it.
You're a monkey, dance monkey, in your little spangly shoes.
Speaking of twist endings, Shut Up and Dance is an awesome episode, right? The whole episode, this man is being blackmailed because some people on his webcam found that he was jerking off a little bit. The whole episode, you're like, okay, dude, he's jerked off a little bit. Personally, because it's almost happened, I swear to God, if someone has my dick pic and they're like, we're gonna send this to everyone, I'll be like, okay, my penis. It's important to know who you're talking to and who you can trust before you send out nudes to other people. A lot of people have had their nudes leaked on the internet, and it's a horrible feeling. And a lot of people can relate to this episode, even though not to the level that the main character does throughout it as they're watching it, right? It's just like, I probably wouldn't go on a whole fucking thing if someone leaked my nudes, right? Like, okay, go ahead, right? It's embarrassing, it's shitty, but like, okay, to the level that he does it is absolutely crazy. But as you get to the episode's ending, you're like, oh. After getting help by Jerome Flynn, who has more of a reason to actually do all this stuff as he doesn't want it. The fact that he was about to see a prostitute leaked to his wife, and it all ends with them delivering a package and having this like big fist fight, and it like zooms out and you're not sure what's gonna happen, right? But then he ends up coming out on top and you're like, Jesus, this guy's killed a man. Right as everyone seemingly does what they were told to do, it's all leaked regardless, and you're like, oh my God. And not only do a couple of these people end up looking at some horrid shit, but also does the main character. And as you did in White Bear, but probably even worse, actually, this main character you've been rooting for the whole time, and you're just like, man, you're a stupid kid, why are you doing this? But I hope you get out of this. He's a pedophile.
Gotcha, bitch.
Yeah, he's been looking at child porn, which is something that is an absolutely shocking moment. Done fantastically over the phone by the woman who plays Kenny's mom. I can't think of the actress right now, sorry. But this absolutely heart-wrenching Kenny, it was kids. Don't tell me this isn't true, is such a crazy ending. And the fact that they do that to me after rooting for this guy the whole time, why? Why do you do this? The internet is a horrible place, all right? And if you ever think, you know, maybe don't do it. Don't do it because it's weird, but also don't do it because you'll get caught. Don't think you won't get caught. The internet is a horrible place and can turn people who are probably regular into horrible people. Get help. On a much lighter note, San Junipero is the next episode, and it's so much better. San Junipero is this very cute little love story about two people who are much older, going through this like weird sort of virtual reality thing. It's a little bit like The Grain from before, but it's more like connected to your head, which is the other version of it that will be as the series goes on. They're able to like put themselves in this cloud thing where people are able to have their own separate lives. They're able to go in like different versions of the same area, like different eras, and it's pretty neat, right? Our two main characters like to hang out in the 80s. They connect very well together. Yorkie meets up with Kelly and they really enjoy each other. Yorkie, who at this point is dying, really wants to find someone that she can really spend the rest of her life with, and finally finds that in Kelly. Kelly, who was really just here because she's also around the end of her life, really just wanted to have some fun and feel young again for once. What's cool is most of the episode you're like, why is this in the show? They're just like, they're just a cute little couple. You end up finding out that it is this virtual reality thing, and the two of them want to connect, and they end up like getting married because ultimately, with Yorkie dying, she really needs to find an actual family member to pull the plug for her. But then Kelly's like, why not me? We actually have a connection here. Why be alone when I die when I can be with someone who I care about? And you end up having this very cute ending, which is finally a good happy ending with no twist to it. We did it, guys. No twist endings. Just happy for once. That wasn't hard, was it? By the way, there's gay in this show. A lot of it. So if you don't like that, fuck out of here.
You're a killer! Sir, yes, sir! Let me see your war face. Ah! That's a war face! Now let me see your war face!
Alright, very quickly, less fun is Men Against Fire. I don't like it. Next episode, just kidding. It's basically, as it begins, it's your typical, like, military fair, or they are search for people called roaches, and you're like, what's that? But you find out other weird little creatures, and you're like, oh, what? Why is there creatures in this show now? But you end up finding out that they also have their own version of the grain, and that they're actually being, like, forced to perceive them as such, and most people literally don't know that these people are just people who are disparaged and are being kicked out by society. And while that idea is interesting and could be something that's a really good way to have a commentary on the military, it's not. It really isn't. The ending episode and seeing how far the military and the government would go to shut down anyone who might want to oppose them is generally really good, but that ending is it, right? The rest of it's really boring. It's just uncompelling main characters, especially the main character who constantly just dreams of an attractive woman. I mean, understandable, but like, why? You just keep doing it. Nothing really happens by the end of it. The roach people are still being hunted down, and it's just like, if I wanted some actual smart commentary on the military, I'd watch Starship Troopers again. In fact, I might.
Oh, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!
Season 3, we get Hated in the Nation. Bees! This episode's boring. I'm sorry. People really enjoy this episode. I've heard people really enjoy this episode. I forgot that is what I was told the first time I watched this, and when I was looking up stuff during the rewatch, I remembered, yeah, people really like this episode, right? It's this very slow-paced drama. It's a bit of a cop drama. It's a bit of like a sort of X-Files type thing where there's one person who's a lot more adept at technology and one person who doesn't really care that much about it. Like Wong's in this, and he's really good in this, actually. And listen, most of the performances in most of the episodes are really great, right? But I just didn't care the whole time. I don't care about the bees. I mean, I do care about the bees, but not the robot bees. Death Tube Movement, Well, hashtag thing is a very interesting concept that, as a commentary on cancel culture, is very cool, but they don't spend too much time on it, and they don't really spend too much time on how it affects society. It's just more like, who's controlling these bees? We don't know, and we never find out. Don't let them inside you. Bees. I think it's fine, but there's nothing that grasps me from this episode besides that there's robot bees, I guess. If you wonder what the best episode is, it's this one. Why is USS Callister the best episode? Because I'm a Star Trek fan, and that's it. That's the reason. Callister Inc. produces the multiplayer game Infinity, which is basically an advanced version of what we'll later see in Fighting Vipers, and a sort of prototype version of what we see in San Junipero kind of thing. Everything's connected, we promise. James Walton is its CEO, but Robert Daly is the brain behind the game. He's the one who made all the code, and he's the one who makes all the code all weird. He has his own spaceship based upon a Star Trek-like show, which he calls USS Callister, where he basically makes like AI version of the people who he works with in a sort of cookie-y way. More than likely showing that this is like a prototype version of what will later become the cookies, or around the same time sort of thing. Point is, these virtual people think that they are those people until they're basically forced into submission to pretend to do roles for him. While he's not playing it, they ultimately live their own lives, not too much of lives though, because they literally are incapable of going anywhere or doing anything they want. Hell, they don't even have wieners. A new programmer comes upon, and she ends up looking to one of the other people as like, no, I wouldn't date Robert, and this is enough for Robert to put her on the ship and sexually harass her. Thanks to her being the new person, she's able to talk everyone into this big plan, which works out very well enough as they get the real Nanette to basically distract Robert Daly enough, as they're able to escape into the wormhole of the big update, which allows them to go through the Infinity landscape on its own and just go into like different people's worlds, basically turning them into their own sort of like USS Callister Star Trek-y type world where they're able to just explore the virtual world now. Well, happy ending? What do you know? It's really fun. It's very entertaining, and I just love Star Trek stuff. So when you make a weird, screwed up version of Star Trek, this like darker version of it, where he's able to just turn people who disagree with him into monsters that are for his later storylines, I love it. I love it. And all the characters are very fun and goofy, and they sort of go from unlikable in the real world into likable as they found out that, hey, they were kind of dicks, weren't they?
Who's watching?
Archangel. Very similar to Hated in the Nation, this is a thing that I did disagree with most people about, but it's sort of the opposite, right? A lot of people don't care for Archangel. Not that they hate it, but they don't care, right? It is a pretty typical plot line of mom is too protective over daughter, and daughter ends up doing teenager things, so she goes, don't do that, and she goes, fuck you, mom. However, the real main point of it, the technology part of it, is that she has like a whole thing shoved in her brain, which only a few kids did, because in universe it ended up being a big problem, so they didn't do any more of it. But due to this, she's still connected to the Archangel program, so if the mom ever wants to see, she easily can with her tablet. This ends up being a real big problem when she's younger, that's because the daughter can't see any like blood or anything, she ends up hurting herself and goes a little bit too weird, right? So the mom turns it off, but after seeing that her daughter's being a teenager, she turns it back on and ruins her relationship after seeing him, you know. I really like it. I find it this very nicely written drama about this mother and daughter relationship, which ends so poorly and so realistically, as lots of people have this sort of helicopter parentage that they want to move away from, that they never talk to ever again. I've known people who have that sort of relationship with their parents, and it's just better that you don't talk to them, right? Blood is thicker than water is a stupid sentiment, which ultimately means nothing, especially when it involves weird technology shoved in your brain, right?
Hey, what is this thing? Get it off of me!
There's a limit to how much you can parent your child. You have to let them experience bad things and explain it later. You can't stop them from seeing the bad things, right? Sheltering your child ultimately results in a worse life for them. You can't just throw them out there in the wild, but you can't keep them in. You need to let your kids experience the world as it is and help them through those experiences. And this is a very good showing of how you don't do that, and how this kind of technology could easily affect those kinds of parents if we ever made that sort of technology, and why it's a bad idea to put technology in your kid's brain. Chipping them, maybe, but like seeing through their eyes and controlling their lives to the point of when they're teenagers, experiencing teenager stuff, no, stop. Crocodile, also sort of going with that, and a similar idea to what we had with earlier episodes with the grain, is that, you know, when you can see memories appear in people's lives, people kind of have this whole big thing of, well, you're gonna see all the bad things I've done, oops, and you really ultimately have to really be careful of what you do when you have this sort of technology around. Crocodile is sort of in an earlier version of that sort of thing, as they're not quite at the point where they can just do that at all points, but shoving a little thing in their brain and having them be reminded through beer, I guess, allows people to sort of go back into their memories, and they're able to see it through this little computer thing. That version of technology is very interesting, and it's cool that it's this original version of it. The actual episode, not all that great. I don't think it's bad. I think the main character is a little bit too much by the conclusion, but I feel like her needing to deal with this and it getting further and further out of control is very interesting. I like that sort of concept. I like a tragic character where you liked it first and you understood why they started it, but by the end of it, you're like, what have you done? I feel sorry for the fact that you've ruined your entire life in trying to keep it. And I like that we see that the side story of this lawyer just trying to find out who hit her client with a car was a person who at that time just happened to murder someone and doesn't want anyone to find out. All because that in the past, her and that guy who was her ex-boyfriend accidentally hit and killed somebody and just kept it and didn't tell anybody. And now she doesn't want anyone to find out about that. So it just kind of keeps escalating, and I don't know why it's called Crocodile, by the way. I have not a single idea. Mostly it's because of the crocodile tears that the main character has, because we're not supposed to believe that she actually feels bad about it. But the actual actress, Andrea Riseborough, is just really good and very believable, so I don't think that she didn't feel bad about any of this. I think she feels bad about it all the way up until the conclusion, where she murders a blind child for some reason. And then they get the information out of a guinea pig? Which is like, how'd they get the guinea pig to remember all that? Did they put a beer under the guinea pig's nose? That was stupid. No, I'm not making a declaration to murder Skrillex. I'm talking about the app that apparently that these characters use. That's the point of the episode, by the way. It's a weird algorithm that's happening inside an app that allows you to get to your perfect match. Considering that's bullshit. I don't like this episode. The twist ending that reveals that it was all just in an app not only kind of ruins the whole thing, but it's also not how those kind of dating apps work. And those dating apps are always a gigantic scam. So the fact that the idea that there's some kind of simulated versions of me and other people making it through Tinder when nothing really has ever come out of most interactions I've had on dating apps. The reason I hate it is because, God, I've had some bad relationships in the past, and I relate too much to this main character. The whole point of it is that, at least at first, you're supposed to think that it's some kind of society where people use whatever weird little thing that they have in order to date people, and that's how dates happen. This weird little thing that tells them how long they're going to be with this person, which could be for a whole year or for a day, and this is supposed to eventually bring you to your perfect match somehow. It can match you with the same person multiple times, or it can match you with one horrible person for a very long time. Why? I have no single idea. But considering I've been in a relationship where I've been stuck in one and wasn't able to get out of it while the person I was really actually wanting to date was in a really good relationship, having a great time, I kind of relate a little bit too much to this main character for a good chunk of it. However, this episode does do what it was supposed to do and does accurately make you feel what it wants you to, where you feel like, oh my God, you idiot, what have you done? When he finally gets back with the one girl that he wanted to get to, the other main character, and he ends up checking the time they have when she was like, let's not do that. Like, you idiot. You could just went with it forever, you know? You could have just been like, whatever, we're just gonna hide him and never hear the like beep beep beeping when it's like time's up. Like, no, hide that shit. Like, don't be like, oh, but I wonder how long it's going to be. Like, no, you are with the girl you want to be, hide that shit. And while that feels like it's a bad part of the episode, that's what the episode's supposed to make you feel. But I have to give it points for that. However, a little bit too real, and I don't feel like I ever want to watch this episode again. It's a good one, but like, ooh. I'm a metalhead, a metalhead, a metalhead, a metalhead. Metalhead, do you like black and white stuff? Do you like the shortest episode of the whole series? Do you like robot dogs? The ones that like easily you can kick nowadays, but now they're murderous in the future. I don't know if this episode is supposed to imply that these things took over the world, because if that's the case, the fact that she's easily able to just shotgun the guy, how, right? It's like how A Quiet Place shows that this small group of country bumpkins are able to easily find the weakness of this alien, but like the government couldn't before. This feels like a bad Terminator. I don't like Metalhead. It's very boring. While its cinematography is really good, nothing happens. I don't care about the character. I don't care about this world, which is just not very well built up. And it just feels like a big waste of time. Black Museum. It's a very similar episode to White Christmas. I feel like people, when they went into this, knew that it was going to be the big Easter egg episode. This was the episode that was going to be like, hey, everything's connected. But it wasn't like a big, like, presentation of them explaining like all the connections like I'm sure they wanted to be. It's an episode like White Christmas, right? It's just 3 separate storylines all coming together, and all of them are vaguely connected. And for that, I think it's actually a lot better than people give it credit for. I think its storylines are all very entertaining, and the actual presenter is a very fun character. Like beginnings of the technologies of the like grain stuff and the cookie stuff, and how there had to be these horrible times for us to actually experiment to make sure that those things would work, and the aftermaths of when they didn't work at first, and how we would perfect that kind of technology, is the kind of stories I feel like Black Mirror should definitely tell, right? How technology can affect us makes sense, but how we get to that point and how that can affect the people who are sort of the guinea pigs of this kind of technology is a very interesting storyline. How it affects these people in just the horrible way it does, oh my god, is that crazy. Again, how the guy who's in charge of this is basically connecting all 3 storylines. Now he uses the like taking the physical essence of a person and putting him in his virtual state is horrible. The fact that he makes a person live in his constant pain of being electric chaired forever is horrible. And yeah, this doesn't necessarily sit you down and explain every single one of the things in the exact timeline, but it does give you the like basics of where this technology was and how it would sort of become what it was, and tells 3 very fun, very interesting storylines as it's doing this. It's not the best, obviously. It is a very fun episode that I feel like people really gotta look back at and really give like a second try, right? It's not White Christmas, but it is Black Museum.
You got the touch!
The interactive film Bandersnatch. Bandersnatch was the reason why it took a little bit for season 5 to be made, as a bunch of its budget and time was made to make the interactive film Bandersnatch. And to be this big experimental idea that Netflix was starting to do and quickly kind of gave up on ever wanting to do ever again. It's basically a choose your own adventure, but in live action. So it's basically those games back on the Sega CD. So there you go. Pretty sure it knows what it is because it basically feels like that sort of thing, both in the way that it's acted and also the way that it's shot. There's a lot of different paths. There's a lot of different adventures you can go on. It's really cool to see all of them and where they all lead, and these very different secrets on why this is all some kind of like mental experiment and how all this is supposed to be the way it is, and this deeper meaning that I don't understand because I'm dumb. Bandersnatch is cool. Bandersnatch is a very fun little adventure that if you haven't done, it's easily doable, right? It's not part of the actual episode order as you see it on Netflix. It's its own separate thing there, but you know, I count it as an episode of Black Mirror because why wouldn't you? Finally, though, we did get Season 5. Trucking Vipers is the first episode of Season 5, the first of 3 episodes. Each of these are pretty good. Trucking Vipers was one that I really enjoyed when I first watched it, right? Mostly because I really enjoy video games, especially fighting games. However, going back into it, it's just alright, right? They clearly tried to do a very similar thing to San Junipero, and 2 people really finding themselves, and then it ended up being not as interesting. It feels like they take themselves a little bit too seriously, and they go just like a little bit too long with these like montages of them being sad that they're gay. And while I like the aesthetic that they have for the fighting game, and I love the line of "I fucked a polar bear and I still can't get over you," which is just such a fucking line. Cinematography is amazing in this episode, probably the best of the series in general. The actual main part of the episode, not all that great.
Get in that car or my foot is getting in your ass!
Smithereens, an episode about a man who decides to go just way over the top on the fact that you know, social media is really affecting everybody and how it basically controls everyone. It's an episode that doesn't necessarily evolve around any specific technology, but is more around how technology affects us, mostly social media. Andrew Scott is Chris, and he is working for this rideshare app, mostly through this like fake profile, so that he could try and get someone who works for Smithereens so that he could basically hold them hostage so they could talk to the main guy. This ends up going way further than he wanted it to, but he is able to talk to him, who of course is played by Topher Grace out of all people. Genuinely powerful episode that it's a very good showing of that technology really does just control us and make us constantly watch our phones to the point where we just lose sense of all reality. Not in any necessarily way that they did it in Nosedive, but in a much more realistic, very emotional way that Smithereens does it. I really, really enjoy this episode. I remember some people didn't quite understand it when it first came out, but honestly, I just love it. Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2 is all about Rachel and Jack, who live with their father, who's this mousetrap guy, and they end up finding sentience in this like AI made copy of Hannah Montana, to which I mean Ashley. Ashley O is basically made brain dead by her manager slash aunt after she decides that she wants out of her contract.
The reason I'm here is to introduce to you
to get the help of the fully unlocked AI of Ashley O through Ashley 2, and they in this like Disney Channel hijinks-esque way are able to help her and stop the ant. That's kind of what it is, though. If you go into it thinking Black Mirror, you're not gonna like it. But if you go into it thinking Disney Channel movie, yeah, it's really fun. It's really goofy. I really like it. If it was a little bit lit brighter and had some more jokes, it was a little bit longer, could easily be a Disney Channel movie, guaranteed. Hell, add like a boyfriend subplot there somewhere, probably. Get like Taylor Lautner. I don't know who's popular with teenagers anymore or whatever. Moving on. Life is unfair. Joan is Awful is an episode which terrifies me because it's easily possible. In terms of service, you could easily write off everything to them, almost like how South Park did it with Human Sentai Pad.
When you downloaded the last iTunes update, a window on your screen popped up and asked you if you agreed to our terms and conditions. You clicked agree.
But now AI is able to write a whole thing about you. And the fact that it twists ends it with the fact that the actual people that we see throughout it aren't the real Joan, that's crazy to me, that they just pulled that so easily. Insane. Also, Selma Hayek as herself, but not herself, is also crazy. AI and the real threats of it, and the fact that it could be easily advanced to the point of just making a whole show and making fake AI versions of people. We are literally on the cusp of that. People have already started to do that sort of thing in ways, and we really have to start smashing some computers because they will continue to try and do that sort of thing. To the point where this kind of episode could easily be real.
I'm Scottish!
Loch Henry is about Davis and Pia, two film students who are visiting Davis's mother Janet as they're looking in the fictional town of Loch Henry, where they're going to learn about some kind of guy. But after meeting up with Davis's friend, they find out about Ian Adair, who is this murderer who did some very screwed up things. And seeing that this could easily be something that is a much better film, but also could bring in tourists to the area, which has been barren since the actual original murders, well, then they go looking into that. They find out quite a bit about it, and it's this very fun little mystery adventure of, well, what's going to happen? Why is the dad of the one bar owner very suspicious about it, right? But after looking through the tapes and trying to digitize it, they, oh my god, this immediate just shift of it turns out that the reason why people didn't want them to look into it, and or at least in the certain ways, is because, oops, Davis's parents were actually part of the murders, and they were actually part of it. The mom finds out that they found out, and she ends up accidentally getting Pia killed, and then also kills herself. Davis to get very popular and wins awards and has his big famous documentary. He loses everything that he had before, you know? He loses the life that he loved having beforehand. So it's like, at what cost did your success come from, you know?
Somewhere beyond the sea.
Beyond the Sea, which is in a, stay with me, alternate 1969, where two people who are up in space have virtual robot bodies that they can come to on Earth. You get Cliff and David. David, who is in a much more loving relationship than Cliff's, is a very happy family who ends up being attacked by angry hippies who not only kill him, but also his family. Now David's stuck up in space with space madness.
Space madness.
Nearly about to kill himself. Cliff is asked by his wife to be like, what if you let him borrow your body sometimes? Which immediately I went, stop it, stop it. I know this episode's gonna get all fucky, and it did. Not the way I thought it was going to, thankfully enough, right? But it did get a little bit fucky. Well, at first, David's really fine with this. He gets a little bit too close with Cliff's wife, and she's just like, okay, all right. And then he ends up starting to try to whoop whoop, and she's like, whoa, hold on. Which weirdly enough, Cliff doesn't find out. She doesn't tell her husband that his friend tried to whoop. But like, all right, until of course Cliff, while David's in his body, finds out some of the naked drawings that he made after a little bit of an argument with Cliff and his wife. He decides he's not going to let David borrow his body anymore. And then quickly, in the most just heart-wrenching ending in the whole series, David basically tricks Cliff to going outside to fix something about the actual ship that they're on. And during that process, he takes his little thing and goes into his robot body and murders his family. Why? I would have been way more interested in hearing more about the actual concept of the robot bodies rather than the actual story that they decided to tell with it. And that ending was a little bit too far, honestly. It very much is like Crocodile. It was fine to go into like a bad ending, but God, that bad? Jeez.
Click.
So many. Oh.
That's going in my cringe compilation.
Maisie Day, I'll go through it real quickly because not much really happens, right? Zazie Beetz, who I love, is a person who's part of the paparazzi, and due to the fact that paparazzis are the worst people on the planet, he ends up kind of stopped doing this. This PS is like in 2006, around that, right? Early 2000s. So we don't have any modern technology, which is like very contemporary and not very Black Mirror. But what's especially Black Mirror is, get this, stay with me. Well, she's pulled back into it due to the fact that this one starlet, Maisie Day, got into some kind of car wreck. She's been getting a little bit too crazy. She's been not showing up to shoots, and people want to find out what's happened to her. So she's then brought to this rehab place. And at first you're like, oh, she's on drugs. She's going to get harassed. There's going to be some kind of weird hijinks, right? Turns out he's been like chained up. And while you think it's like, wow, there's some crazy cult stuff going on. No, she's chained up because she, stay with me, is a werewolf. She is a... Why? And that's the end of the episode. She chases the characters around, kills them, and then ends up getting shot to death really quickly, mind you, right? What?
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world.
The very last episode of Black Mirror so far is Demon 79, an episode which is absolutely fantastic. Like the previous one, it's not very Black Mirror-y at all. You know what it's about? Anja Hassan is met by a demon played by Papa Isidu, who is basically trying to get her to murder people to stop the apocalypse. She basically does so, right? She kills this random guy who is apparently a pedophile, and kills this guy who they set up in the early part of the episode had killed his wife, his brother, who was a witness. But then after seeing that, oh, that wasn't enough for the 3 killings, because apparently you can't kill killers as part of this, she then goes after this one guy who's running for government, who weirdly, through flash forward, we see that he's basically responsible for all the bad technology things that's been through the whole series, or at least would, unless she decides to kill him, right? She then goes after him, but due to the fact that the police are already looking into the first guy she killed, and they suspect her now because they're linking her to the second guy she killed, they catch her before she's ever able to kill the guy, and due to that, the apocalypse starts immediately there. So technically, was changed, you know? The little Waldo thing never happened, but nukes dropped in 79, so... In the fact that she failed, her demon friend is like cast out of the afterlife, so he's like, you can just come with me instead of getting nuked, and she's like, all right. This is not Black Mirror in the slightest, right? But it is absolutely fantastic. I love this episode. Alright, so now it's time for the actual ranking. If you want a little bit more of an actual description of the episodes themselves, because you've skipped towards the ending, then go watch the rest of the video. Teehee. Anyway, number 28, the National Anthem. People proclaim that it's supposedly deeper than it actually is, but I hate it so much, and I refuse to listen. Number 27, Metalhead. It was really boring, and I fell asleep again. Both times I've watched this in my life, just fall right to sleep, I swear to God. 26, Men Against Fire. I like the idea of making some kind of commentary against the government, but I've seen Starship Troopers, and this sure as shit is in Starship Troopers. Number 25, Waldo Moment. It's interesting to see how very similar modern day politics are to what this showed in this episode many years before. However, it's still really annoying. 24, Hated in the Nation. People really enjoy this one, and frankly, I just don't see it. It's just... I understand that it is definitely well written and well acted, but I just couldn't grab onto anything about it. Sorry. Number 23, Maisie Day. Really boring to the point where suddenly there's a werewolf. Why was there a werewolf? Number 22, Crocodile. It was almost interesting until it got very dark and not very fun by the end of it. Number 21, Beyond the Sea. Same, I was really hoping to see cool space stuff, and then it just got very weird and then very dark right at the ending for just no reason at all. Number 20, Hang the DJ. Man, I'm really single. Oh god. Number 19, Black Museum. Black Museum was an interesting attempt to redo White Christmas, and it did an okay job. People really need to be not as harsh on it, but it's just kind of okay. Number 18, Striking Vipers. I really like fighting games, and I really wanted this to be good, and then I'm just kind of being okay, I guess. Number 17, Jonah's Awful. It was a really cool concept, and AI does concern me a lot, but like, it probably didn't need to be as weird as it was. Number 16, Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2 is honestly just a Disney Channel movie, and that's just what it should be in reality. Number 15, Entire History of You is Marriage Story if it was a lot more sci-fi-y, and it's a very well-written drama that honestly does get a little bit much by the end there. Number 14, Lock Henry. I really, really like murder mysteries, and I really like true crime stuff, and this really hits that niche for me. It's a little bit less Black Mirror than I would want it to be, but it's still pretty cool, honestly. Number 13 is 15 Million Merits. People will be a little bit annoyed the fact that it's this low and not the like top, but you know what? I don't think it's the best thing of all time like everyone seems to proclaim it to be, but you know what? It's still pretty alright. Number 12, Shut Up and Dance really just comes from the fact that its ending was really shocking. Listen, when I was rooting for this kid for doing something really stupid, and then he ended up being really, really stupid and bad, like a horrible person, that really affected me. Number 11, Archangel, the episode that I feel like people really don't like, but honestly, I just really enjoy it. I kind of just like seeing helicopter moms getting their ass beat. Teehee. Number 10, Playtest. I like video games and spooky, and that's all it really needs to be, let's be honest here. Number 9, Smithereens is a very interesting drama really going into more modern ideas of social media, and I really enjoy how it does it. Number 8 is Bandersnatch. The really interesting idea of this virtual interactive movie was a really cool one, and people didn't shut up about it for like a whole month. It was really fun. It's a little bit too much, honestly, which is the reason it's not as higher as it probably should be. Number 7 is Be Right Back. Despite the Robo-Wiener joke, AI trying to replicate humanity and failing to do so is an interesting idea for a storyline, and I really do enjoy the storyline. This is one I'll definitely come back to multiple times. Number 6 is White Christmas, just a very well-written anthology storyline kind of wrapping together into one storyline, which really tricks you out by the end of it. It's a very great showing of how great the writing of this series can really be. Now for the top 5. The bottom of the top 5 is Demon 79, the least Black Mirror episode in the entire show. It's just really enjoyable. It feels like a weird buddy cop sort of movie from the 70s. Honestly, if they made like a full movie of it, I think I'd be down to watch it. Number 4 is White Bear. Also a similar idea to Shut Up and Dance. Most of it comes from your first viewing and the big twist ending. However, it's still very enjoyable, and I just find it very cool. Looking back at it on a rewatch is still very fun. Plus, you can show it to people who haven't seen it, and you can see their just crazy reaction. Number 3 is San Junipero. Listen, sometimes things don't need to be some kind of like evil, crazy sci-fi thing. Sometimes things can just be fun and cute, and that's what San Junipero is. Number 2 is Nosedive, a great showing of how society can change due to the perception of how people are and what their status is and if that's really important. It's a really great like dystopian future that honestly I'd love to see more of and how people sort of react to it. And number 1 is USS Callister, for again the obvious reason of I'm a Star Trek fan and I refuse to say otherwise. And that's Black Mirror. This whole series is mostly about how absolutely horrible technology could be, but also how kind of great it could be and how it just could be very easily misused by bad people, right? take Black Mirror as this idea of that technology is all evil. It's not what it's supposed to really be. It's more that there is an easy way for people to misuse it and how it can affect us if we decide to do so, right? How easily the internet and people on it and how the technology connecting to us could easily affect our lives in very horrible ways if we don't keep ourselves human, right? There's much more to the world than just being on the internet all of the time. God, go for a walk. Go for a fucking walk. But that being said, technology can still be really good, and Black Mirror does still give us a good showing of how it can bring us good stuff alongside the bad. One focuses a little bit too hard on the bad and a little bit too hard on always trying to constantly make a message out of it. It, for the most part, does a very good job having an actual smart message, and most episodes are, if not very, very smart and very well made, or at least very enjoyable. Episodes, I would say there's only really like 8 of them that I wouldn't ever really want to watch again. And while some of them aren't necessarily my favorites, and I'm not going to pick them first if I was to rewatch them, there is a bunch of them I feel like I would gladly rewatch with someone, especially if they've not seen Black Mirror. A lot of them are just very fun, and it's a series that is made by some people that really know what they're doing. It's a series that I'm glad continued going on, and I'm glad it's going to keep going on, as I'm sure they're going to make a season 7 anytime soon. Can't wait for whatever weird thing they're going to be doing. Hopefully it doesn't involve pigs. But until they make another Black Mirror season, I've been the Movie-a-thoner. I hope you enjoyed this video and my big go-over of the Black Mirror series and my big ranking of the whole thing. If you enjoyed it, then go ahead and leave a like and make sure you subscribe to see anything else I'll be doing in the future. And most importantly, stay good, stay safe, don't be an asshole.